Hey everyone, I wanted to take a brief moment to go over the, well, maybe not quite so brief, the proposed balance changes that just dropped today. And of course, Zombie Grub, Steadfast Cats, and I are going to go over this in more depth at 1 p.m. Pacific, or at 10 p.m. Pacific, so that's 1 p.m. or 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, which will be happening today, the day this video drops. So you should take a look at that and see things more real time. But I wanted to talk about this anyways because it's a doozy, and I think more so than a lot of patches, it's not quite to the level that people are looking for, and there are just a lot of things that they don't really, they do away with unit identity, which I'm not a fan of, and they don't really solve. I mean, there's some I like, but I think in general, I think this needs another round. I may be wrong, but anyway, let's get into it, shall we? So of course, more than we had in the last balance change, we actually have reasons why the balance council wants to go and wants to make these changes happen, and they gave us 5 as well as feedback on the actual changes themselves. But they want to make Protoss more stable at a professional level in the early game against Terran. Effectively, it's against Raven pushes, but really it's against Terran, right? That's been a problem from like 5 to 8 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. Protoss have really been struggling at the professional level, but obviously below that, you know, what is it, like 25, like 30, over 33% of Grandmaster in Europe is Protoss players, you know. Below top 10 in ESL Masters in Europe, it's Protoss. It's anything below the tippy top level. It's very Protoss favored, or very Protoss overemphasized. High level, that is still a problem. They also want to make more builds viable in the mid game, which valid, yeah. Reduce the strength of Mass Ghost, reduce the strength of Banelings, all for that. Disruptors as well. Maybe not Disruptors, because while they are strong units, I mean, Protoss definitely needs the help. See, this is where we get into a problem, though, because they talk about making overly specialized units, Cyclones, Motherships, and Infestors, viable through more stages of the game. And what I worry about what they've done here, and we'll talk about this as soon as we get into it, is instead of making these overly specialized units more viable through stages of the game, they've removed their identity. And it is totally fine to have a unit that is only in the early game, say a Reaper, or only a defensive unit, say a Queen. I mean, Queen at times has not been an overly defensive unit, and that's been a problem. But there is nothing that says that every unit in Starcraft has to be valid or viable through every stage of the game. In fact, I think that's the wrong decision to go for. Starcraft is good in part because you have units that have a role, that fill that role really, really well, but you don't have to see them every game. Also, visual clarity is always nice. I do like the Medevac change. And they want to promote more interactions in the late game scenarios, but they're doing this by making things faster, right? That's really the big changes they made. Tempests are faster, Motherships are going to be faster, more responsive, and so too the Broodlords. It's okay to have slow units. It's okay to have bulky units when the rest of the game is very fast. That's a differentiator. A differentiator. I talked about this with bullet point 3. I'm talking about it here. Units in this patch feel like they're losing their identity quite a bit. I'm not a fan. Anyway, let's get into it. So the big one, the one that most people are talking about, is this Cyclone change. They are significantly cheaper, 25 minerals, 50 gas, and you can react to them. It doesn't need a tech lab anymore. You know, they don't live as long. It really is a wholesale rework, but you lose lock-on for the most part. Lock-on is not this. You don't have this 2-unit 1 setup anymore, where you had lock-on, right? This solid anti-air thing. It was a spell. It was kind of cool. You can kite backwards, and then you just have your baseline auto attack. It's one and the same. Now the auto attack is the lock-on. As they talk about here, auto attack no longer has. Yeah, the lock-on no longer has a cooldown, so that is the auto attack effectively. It's no longer nearly as effective against air, so it's going to make it harder to deal with, say, proxy oracles in the early game, or just oracle play in general in the early game, which is maybe fine. I think oracles do too little to Terrans, because of course it takes 3 shots from an oracle to kill an SCV anyways. But we now have these Cyclones that they don't have I mean, I saw someone say that they're effectively Diamondbacks. I mean, yeah, fair. They don't have mag field anymore. You can multiple lock on. Lock on is just, again, their auto attack. They are much slower until you have an upgrade that makes them go 5.1, which is very, very fast. Faster than their previous already fast speed. And again, they're just kind of they're a bulky attacking unit now. There's nothing I mean, they used to be a solid thing, right? They would do a bunch of bonus damage to armor. You would want it out versus that. They were solid defensive units. You could get a couple of them to get snipes. There was an identity, and again, now it just feels like, I don't know, the mech version of the Marine, maybe. I guess the Marauder, right? Because that, you know, Marines or Hellions have that I guess Marine role, but it just doesn't. I don't know. It's not as exciting. It's not as exciting to me. But you know, on the flip side, moving the ghosts in, I'm all for ghost nerfs. I mean, on the flip side of saying it's okay to have units in specific areas and pushing back a little bit about this idea about having units kind of have multiple areas and multiple uses, I do think we saw too much ghost play over the course of the last 2 years, especially in TVZ. I mean, when you get to a point where your unit composition is medevacs, ghosts, and tanks, you know, liberators, whatever, but you don't need, when ghosts are the only thing that you have, not all that much. Like, again, I think ghosts should be a part of an army, but they're spellcasters. They shouldn't be your entire army. So this is, again, a step into that direction. And this also reverts the EMP pseudo buff that we got, where it was a buff in the mid game and a nerf in the late game, and now we're just saying, yeah, EMP radius 1.5. Set it back to what it was before the upgrade. Just don't have the upgrade, which I think is a good idea. I think in general, ghosts were too strong against Protoss with that timing, and Protoss needs to help. I really do. Everyone talks about ZVP as the problem, and I think that's a little bit selection bias. I think it's more that Cyril is just the GOAT in the matchup and no one can touch him. But it was pretty obvious that Protoss needed some significant help against Terrans from that 5 to 10 minute window, and this is one of a couple changes that I think really helps them in that direction. The other one is ghosts take 3 shots to kill ultras now instead of 2, and in general, they're not quite as strong against most things, but they do have they lean. This is actually one of the examples of a unit that gains identity instead of losing it. We talked about the Cyclone as just kind of being more of a blah unit, but the ghosts are now very much, yeah, they got sniped. They can take down important bio units against the Terran or against a Zerg, but they are very much now. Their setup is very much an anti-spellcaster unit, to the exclusion of other things. With this, they have the full 170 damage against psionic units, against spellcasters. They have, again, it puts them more into a role, which again I'm a fan of. I think in general, having very specific roles and having to bounce around is probably a better idea for most of the units in StarCraft. Not all of them. I mean, Marines being all-rounders are solid. Blings being mostly all-rounders are solid. Stalkers, same idea. But when you go up the tech tree, it shouldn't just be a strict replacement. Oh, ghosts are better than Marines and Marauders, so we're just gonna eventually swap them out. It should be ghosts are an augment, a supplement to deal with certain things, and that's kind of, I guess, what this is trying to attempt, and I'm a fan of that one. I don't really have too much impact on the Widowmine changes. It is drilling claws only, so it doesn't really impact those early game Widowmine drops. It probably should make the Terran pushes a little bit stronger, because you can kind of unburrow and kind of leapfrog yourself a little bit further forward against Zerg players. I don't really think it's going to do all that much. I do like the targeting line being more visible. That should make the splitting against Widowmines a little bit easier for players to find out, and that, more than anything, that reads. I know they talked about wanting to kind of do things at the highest level, and in general, I think a lot of these changes are targeting pro level play. But this one feels like it is something targeting mid-level play. It's like, hey, yeah, we're gonna make the drilling claw. We're gonna make a targeting line easier to find. You know, I don't think it's that big of a change. That it feels more like a quality of life than anything else. So if you disagree with me on this one, let me know. But it just does feel more like quality of life. I don't think we need this. It's not what a lot of people were reading this and saying it means that medevacs are going to heal twice as fast. No, they're just going to get their energy back twice as fast. They're going to heal at the same speed, but they're going to be able to do more of it over the course of a game. I think that this is not. I don't like this, actually. I think one of the things that is an interesting army composition decision that a Terran has to make is how many medevacs do I get? You know, do I overbuild medevacs because I'm really trading heavily? Do I underbuild them if I want to build Vikings and then I can't build as many? Like, it adds an extra level of decision making to starport units, and this, granted, it's I imagine this is going to still be in the same level of the tech tree, so it's still going to need a fusion core, because that's what Caduceus Reactor did. But this means that really what this means is that you need less medevacs for the same amount of healing. because well, yeah, in late game scenarios, you'll need effectively less medevacs for the same amount of healing, which means you can have more liberators and more Vikings and whatever else. And I don't know. I don't like it. A Terran army, a massive supply of Terran army, is often kind of balanced a little bit by the fact you need a medevacs to equalize, to go with it. And now it's going to be 160 supply of Terran army or something, and it's going to be that much stronger. And it is I think Terran players should be punished for overstimming. Is what it gets down to at the end of the day, and this reduces that a little bit. So again, I'm not a fan. I do, however, love the Raven change. So I've been talking about this 5 to 10 minute window where Protoss really struggle, and in part because Ravens were buffed pretty significantly in the last patch, where their gas cost was was buffed by about 50 gas. It went from 200 to 150, and what that meant was that a Terran build order now could, a standard Terran build order that's not doing some sort of crazy drop or something, so not Yun, but most Terrans, they can go and they can get a Raven out, two Ravens, whatever they want, and they can get tanks out, which kept them safe from Widow Mines, safe from Blink Stalker pushes, and still have those Ravens to deal with Colossus Slayer. It's really solid. It really was a big difference, and it's one we really, as casters, we haven't talked about as much as we should have. This slows that timing down. This makes it harder to do so, because you get, against robo openings, you get Ravens specifically for the interference matrix. Locking this behind an upgrade, adding 1 minute effectively to Terran build orders. Maybe not as long, but what this means now is you cannot react. You're going to have a tech lab locked to that starport for quite a little bit of time, for 57, almost a minute. It's cheap, which is fine, but it's the time that matters here. And that means even after you get the Raven out, you're either going to be building medevacs one at a time, or you're going to be waiting, and you're just going to have to wait until you can get double medevacs out at a time, which again slows the push down. So this is I think this is going to be a pretty significant change. This means now that pushes are a little bit slower. It gives Protoss a little bit more time to get set up. Or it means they're going to be pushes without Ravens, which means that Colossus play, that Robo play in general, is going to be that much more effective. And theoretically, Charged Blood Archon styles are going to be more effective because of the Ghost nerfs. So these armies that can deal with the Terran pushes are not going to be as strong. And this change in the Ghost change really, at least theoretically, provide a lot of room now for Protoss to get into their mid game and be happy about it, and not just die to the first Terran push and the game's over, which I think is massive. That is a really big deal. And I know there's discourse about these are all other race buffs for the most part, and Protoss nerfs. These couple Terran changes and a Zerg change we're going to talk about in just a little bit, they're Protoss buffs in the grand scheme of things. They do a lot to keep Protoss alive in the mid game, which I think is by far the thing they've been struggling with really the most. But moving on to Zerg, right? Because we've talked about the Terrans. It does feel like some units have lost their identity. Ghosts lean into their identity a little bit more. But really, this is a lot about stabilizing TVP, which I do like quite a bit. But moving on to Zerg here, I think this is fair. Lurkers are not as kind of dominant as they once were because just the meta is not going in that direction. But Adaptive Talons, it's enough to make them burrow and unburrow quicker. They don't have to move faster as well. Fine. And give them a little bit of a nerf or a little bit of a buff to make up for it. That's fine. Although realistically, I think that's not even fair. Probably the biggest buff was the move speed. The unburrow or the reburrow is nice, but it's the move speed that really kind of makes the difference there on that upgrade. So again, removing that makes it really just tamps down on the power, not of late game Zerg, because lurkers aren't really late game units, but on the power of late mid game, early late game Zerg, which I think is great. Again, if you're gonna go a style that forces you to be static, lurkers, broodlords, something, although they have changed broodlords, you're gonna go for a style that forces you to be a little bit static. Make that harder to make it static, right? If you're gonna siege up, allow opponents to not just have to break that position, allow them to try to multitask around a little bit, and that really is what this change provides. So I'll take it. The Infestor rework is interesting though. Because effectively now this means infestors pop out with fungal without having to go for a pathogen gland. So, cast range reduced by 1, which means they can get hit by feedbacks and EMPs easier. The damage is reduced a little bit, but effectively, what's the pathogen glands are what, 150, 150? Yeah, 150, 150. So this is effectively, it gives you it gives you what, like, it gives you half an infestor of gas. Like, that is, it gives you however many banelings. I mean, that is a significant gas cost off the table, even if fungals are a little bit, you know, not as much damage. Fungals are important because they make medevacs not able to pick up, they make stalkers unable to blink backwards, and I mean, they do, the damage is nice, and they make it easier for vials and banelings and things to hit. It's the big deal there. They prevent ghosts from channeling snipes, and they prevent ghosts from cloaking and running away. That's the value. Realistically, fungal would probably still be pretty strong without doing damage. The damage really is secondary. So yeah, you remove damage, sure, it's fine. Making infestors immediately useful and giving effectively half an infestor into the army, is, just in terms of gas cost, is I think that's really significant. And I think we're gonna see this might actually lead to the rise, maybe even more, of Roach Ravager infestor play, like we've seen Dark play a little bit. This might lead to maybe some timings, getting a couple infestors as a transition tech, like we see. Uko is probably the big one that does that at the kind of the pro and the semi-pro level. So I know some people are saying this is a nerf. To me, this feels more like a buff, honestly. And I don't know that infestors needed a buff. I think they had a really solid position. I think they were in a really good spot in the game. I don't think we needed to see more infestors. I don't think we needed to make them immediately useful. I think they were in a good spot where they were. So, I mean, yes, this will make them get played more, but I don't think we had to see that. We're going to see a couple upgrades like this when we talk about the Spire armor upgrades, cost reduced a little bit. It's interesting that they say that air weapons are less useful when I think, well, I guess actually that's fair, because when I think of Zerg flyer upgrades, I think of the specific circumstances where they are useful, right? Meta Wars, you want to get Carapace versus attack, because Carapace applies full value to every bounce, and attack upgrades don't. You want to get them theoretically sometimes corruptors against battle cruisers and carriers, because it's a lot of damage instances, and that applies pretty well. But I guess in general that's fair, and it's 2 Banes effectively nerf at buff at every level, so you get 6 extra banelings as a Zerg. I don't know that that's going to make that much of a difference. I guess it's an extra infestor ish. Well, no, infestor's 300 gas, right? How much does an infestor cost? It's one of those things that you. Oh no, it is 150. Yeah. So, not only do you get a free infestor by losing pathogen gland upgrades, you get a free infestor here off the Spire. I mean, it's a rough equivalency, but I guess, yeah, an extra infestor is nice. Why? They reduce the attention required for getting Viper. I am totally fine with the Zerg spamming out 5 Vipers and accidentally killing their hatch. Like, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I think this was, again, some Zerg thought was annoyed that they were losing their hatches too much. What is a hatchery? Does this change the number of what is a hatchery? What's the hatchery's HP? Is it 1,000? 1,500. So it means 7.5. It means 10 Vipers kill a hatch instead of 7.5. I guess is the logic there. 7.5 consumes. I really don't think this was necessary. This is just blah. Really, I think realistically. Well, actually, the other question is how much an evolution chamber is, because that's the other thing you'll do a lot. So 750. I mean, you go from 4 to 5. It does provide value to the Zerg, but this again, this doesn't do much, and it really does feel it adds to this idea that Zergs are like there's a secret cabal running things, because this is such just a non-change that it adds to the narrative more than anything else. I don't think it does much. Broodlords though. Broodlords are something that we need to talk about, because over the last 2 patches, Broodlords have gotten faster. You know, they were, I forget they were previously. It was like maybe 2, maybe a little bit below 2 in terms of movement speed. Now they're getting faster again, and they nerfed the Broodlings to compensate. Broodlings are a little bit slower. They have less HP. They attack slower. I understand in part. Like, I understand what they're going for here. Broodlords are painful to play. Certainly Protoss player. Like, it was not uncommon once Broodlords came out on timings to just see a Protoss player build a lot of stalkers, certainly in the lower levels, and bounce around and Broodlords can't catch them. The Zerg player loses the game from a winning position. But the slow siege unit that covers off an area that doesn't is the Broodlord's identity. Making them, and I'm going to talk about this for a couple other things, the changes that have been made, making them faster while being less effective. I can get behind making them less effective. I mean, that's fine. Okay, sure, whatever. Reducing their movement speed like this, or making them so much faster, is just, again, one more step in removing or killing the identity of the unit. Now it's less different than other things, than other options that a Zerg has, and I don't think it needs this. I think Broodlords were... I get that you're trying to go for interaction, and that's fine. I mean, certainly late game mech or bio or ghost mech versus Broodlord compositions suck. They're just not fun. Late game Zerg versus Protoss is also not all that great, like the Golden Armada versus Broodlord Viper Corrupt or whatever, but I don't know. It just... We're removing the kind of... It feels like we're removing core flavor for a couple units. I'm not the biggest fan. Like, not everything has to be super fast and speedy. But anyway. Why are we doing this? Sure, you know, deceleration, it decelerates a little bit faster. It drops creep faster, which... Why are we incentivizing queen drops? And I'm not just saying this because Zombiegrub put it out a video earlier, said the same thing. 2 Stargate Void Ray versus queen walks, queen drops was just about one of the worst metas in Starcraft's history. Not the worst. We have Swarm Host, we have Broodlord and Fester. But I don't want to go back to these times. Queen drops, queen pushes. Queen should not be defensive units or offensive units. In fact, there's an argument to be made that they shouldn't be powerful defensive units either. They should just be utility units. They shouldn't fulfill... I wrote an article about this for Stormgate Nexus. And there's a video on YouTube that I'll try to link to at this time, where I talk about how there are kind of key 3 archetypes that exist in an RTS. You have an offensive unit, you have a defensive unit, you have a utility. And no unit should really fill more than 2 of those. And realistically, no unit should fill more than 1 of those. Maybe go into a second one a little bit. But we had a time in StarCraft's history where queens did all 3. They were attack units, very strong in that. That's why we made it so they can't transfuse off creep. They were strong defensive units with massive anti-air transfuse and everything else. And they're required utility unit because they inject. And now we're going back in that direction. Like, I play Zerg. Sure, you know, I like to be able to win games, but making creep delay, like making it easier for queen drops to happen, and this one right here, this transport upgrade, absolutely not. Like, in a vacuum, fine. Dropper Lords are very slow, but that's okay. It's cheap. Zerg already has Ling run bys. They have Nidus play. They have so many. You have Dropper Lords. You have so many ways of harassing. No one has ever said that Zerg doesn't have enough harassment options. Like, that's one of the reasons, and we'll talk about the Baneling change that makes this a little bit better, but that's one of the reasons why Zerg has been strong for the last couple years against Protoss. They have really good harassment options, and now we're just making it so much more. So 2.8, like, it's 0.2 faster with Nubetize Carapace. It's faster without it. Why? Well, no, this isn't necessary. It makes it easier for something to do something that the Zerg race is already very good at. And no, I think nerfing Zerg counterattack opportunities was a good thing. I don't think we have to go. I don't think we have to bring it back up. I don't know. Let me know. Am I off base here? Maybe, but this is just, it's unnecessary. I talk about racial identity. I talk about unit identity. Not everything has to be fast, and not everything has to be able to do everything. Not every race has to be able to do everything at the same level. That's fine. And again, Ling run bys, Lurker run bys, Burrowed Roaches, Nidus play. There are enough run by harassment options that a Zerg has. But this is a bit of a nothing burger. Oh, yay, Ultras can unburrow faster. I mean, sure. Ultra, are we getting into, are these 2 changes trying to get us into Ultra drops? I mean, and hey, it's 25 minerals cheaper. You get a single Ling. I understand wanting to try to get Ultras more, but getting refunded a single Ling for every Ultra you get, that's nothing. Not in the late game. Not when you're mining 3,000 minerals a minute and you're building a bank and whatever. I don't really. I'd be curious to see what the reason for this is. Maybe it matches some number that I'm not aware of. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like much. Talk about things that don't feel like much. It's not the Hydra change. I love StarCraft balancing because over the, what are we, 13 years now of StarCraft's history, speed and range have been one upgrade and have been two upgrades like so often. It just keeps going back and forth as the meta changes. We're now back on one upgrade. 150, 150 is expensive, but I think it is still gonna. I think it is still cheaper than getting the two upgrades. Let's see. Yeah, so that, yeah, it's 50 minerals and 50 gas cheaper compared to the two upgrades together, and it hits faster. So in general, this is actually a massive buff to Hydras, not in the late game, but on their timings. And Hydra are at their core kind of a timing-based unit. So Mio Micah is very happy about this. Maybe some others are very happy about this, but this is actually, people were worried that Hydras were going to be too strong in the last change, and they rolled some of that back. This is Hydra timings are about to get really scary. And as they say here, the strength of Hydra timings will be monitored during Protoss, during the testing period, and with good reason. I think it's going to be very strong. I don't know that it is going to be the biggest. I don't know whether it's going to infect win rates all that much, but we will be seeing a lot more Hydra play. I can tell you that much. And again, it's 50 gas cheaper, a full minute faster. That's the big deal. It's 71 seconds is the two upgrades for the price of one. This is effectively what it is for the time of one. And that is just, the Hydra timings are just going to be utterly terrifying. But we talked about changes to harass, and maybe that's why they're making Dropper Lords a little bit faster. I don't know. This bailing change is a change that has been requested for 5 years now, 6 years now, more, something like that. +2 bailings will no longer one-shot probes or drones. And who cares about the drones? That's not relevant to this for the most part. You don't, I mean, I guess maybe it makes Needling Bane a little weaker, but this is a Needling Bane against Zerg, I mean, which is horrible anyways, because the defending Zerg can get up to lurkers very quickly, and then bailings are useless. For the most part, I mean, you can do Rainer all you want, but most games. Making it so that a Protoss cannot do everything right, slightly not pull their probes, lose their entire probe line anyways, because of one bailing gets through is so fantastic. Like, I play Zerg. I want to win games, but the amount of times you see Hero, you see Classic, you see Max Packs, whoever it is, they are defending the Zerg push to the front. They do it fantastically. There's a run by another natural. They defend that one. And then there are two bailing run bys because this all just gets shift queued up, and they do everything right. And the one bailing slips through, it, dies as it hits the probes effectively because the last Stalker shot goes through, and all the probes die anyways. It's just the margin for error there is so vanishingly small that I'm really happy about this. That being said, I am kind of worried about the other changes because they are making the centrifugal hooks bonus health and really the bonus health being removed there. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects TVZ mid-game. I think this is going to have a lot bigger impact than we think it's going to. I think it is going to make Terran pushes, specifically Terran 2 base pushes, Terran 8 racks very, very strong. And yeah, you know what? It's 50 minerals, 50 gas cheaper, which at and when you get it, 50 minerals and 50 minerals, 50 gas are significant, and it comes a little bit faster. But I mean, I think 8 racks are going to be a lot stronger now. I think that is a big thing to think about. So I don't know. This also might mean that Charged Blood Archon will be a little bit more effective, as Archons are going to kill Banelings it might kill Banelings a little bit faster. I'm not sure the breakdowns or the breakpoints there, but I think this is going to make 8 racks and like the Beyond's like 5 racks 2 base push pretty strong. But I don't know, but it is going to we're going to see more of them, I think. And now we get to the Protoss. Now we get to what many people are saying is not enough. Some people are saying is too much. I don't know. They reduced the cost of shields, which is interesting because yes, they are not super useful versus Terran, and in general they're not quite as effective. But it is an upgrade that applies to literally every unit a Protoss has. It is attack units. Ground attack only applies to ground attack, or to ground units. Ground armor only applies to ground armor. Air attack and armor, same deal. Shields are the one unit that applies to everything. So once you get it, it applies a value to every single part of your game, and you don't need to open up a new upgrade path to go there. So I am okay with this being a little bit more expensive. Yeah, against Terrans, it's not as effective. But again, because it applies, you're playing a premium because it applies to every aspect of your army. And so, I mean, I don't think this is going to make the biggest of deals. Actually, again, this might be another thing that makes Charged Blood Archon a little bit more powerful. I don't really have a good prognostication of how this is going to impact things. outside of maybe seeing it get upgraded as part of timings a little bit more, maybe getting shields instead of like maybe getting like a 1-1-1 instead of a 2-1-0 or something. Because certainly sometimes we do see like an additional armor upgrade or a shields upgrade to get taken instead of a +3 attack, depending on the situation. We also, of course, seeing the air upgrade armor change once again, because this actually, you combine these two and carriers get a lot more expensive, or a lot better. Because you get shields when you get carriers because it applies to every interceptor. And now the fact here that armor and shields are getting better here. Interceptors are about to become, they're going to be the same level of tanky, but it's going to be cheaper to get them that tanky. And with everything else. So these two changes together do make the Protoss Sky Army, I think, it's not better, but it makes it a little easier to get to the kind of that peak value, which is really nice. Moving on to the Warp Prism, this is the same thing they did with the Medevac, where now everything is kind of stays the same size. There was an issue where Medevacs, I think in particular, would get small on big maps, so this makes it a lot easier to see the Medevacs or see Warp Prisms on the map as they run around, which is nice. Not only for players to make it a little bit easier for them to figure out what's happening and respond to drops, but also as an observer. If I'm casting something and I'm observing it, I want to see, and like I want to make sure I don't miss a drop, and this makes it a little bit easier, especially when you're like picture-in-picture because you have a clean feed or something. That's not what this is designed for, but it does make me a little happy. They have reduced the clumping of Disruptors a little bit, so what this does is Disruptors got a little bit smaller. Okay, fine, but Disruptors are not going to clump as much. So I think it's interesting that instead of changing the visual of whether you have a Nova or not, or trying to make it more visible in some way, they just said, the solution here is we're going to make Disruptors clump less. Okay, fine. It doesn't really do all that much against it's not that big of an impact from an attacking perspective. It's not like, actually amend that just a little bit. Against Zerg and Terran, not a big deal. Right, they're going to clump a little bit less, whatever. Against Protoss, though, this means that it's going to be a little bit harder in Blinkstalker Disruptor Wars to get every Disruptor, I think. So that's a big deal. Disruptors clumping less in Blinkstalker Disruptor Wars means that they're more viable because you're less likely to lose them. So we might, it are really PvP late game is already a lot of Blinkstalker Disruptor Wars, and this does kind of further send us down that path, I think. That being said, they do have one additional supply, which does hurt. That means you can get only 2 Disruptors per pylon, or 4 Disruptors per 2 pylons instead of 3, or instead of 5. So it does diminish that a little bit. I don't know that like, yeah. I don't know how much of a fan I am of this, because I think this patch in general, as much as I like some things, is really shoving Protoss into late game's air only. And I hate that style of Starcraft. Y'all, when a Protoss is shoved into their Golden Armada, because that's their best late game solution, it's just the game gets less fun. It's this death ball thing that just sits there. It removes the map for the most part because flying units don't care about map design. And it's not fun. We have occasional games where Protoss stays on the ground in the late game. Showtime played a great game against Cyril and a couple great games against Raynor at Katowice, and more recently where he played ground, and it was so much better because there's multitasking, there's activity, and there's micro, and there's all these things that it's not, you don't really see as much when it's great. I have a bunch of carriers that are going to move forward, and maybe they're going to get abducted or not. So yeah, I understand that Disruptors are annoying, and certainly this feels like a Hero Marine change more than anything. Like Terran players complaining about Disruptors, but late game Protoss ground already struggled. Blinkstalker Disruptor Charge Lot is one of the main ways that Protoss play late game against Terran, and it already doesn't trade cost effectively against top Terrans, and it just makes it even worse. I don't know. Maybe there are some other changes that, like maybe the Immortal change is enough to balance it out, but I don't think so. This one, by the way, this is not a this is fixing a bug. Really, more than anything, it's not how it was supposed to be. So this is going, I don't have any comments now. This is going to be as it is, actually, no, this is a buff, right? So prismatic light, what is the Void Ray movement speed? So Void Rays move at 3.85, and with they move north of 4, like 4.6 ish with prismatic alignment. this makes their this means that a prismatically aligned void ray with the flex veins moves almost as fast, a little bit slower than a standard void ray without prismatic alignments. That's a big deal, actually. What this means now is, granted, you know, fungal parasitic bomb combo says no, but it means when you get flex veins, you can micro against a Zerg army unless you get caught. It means you maybe have a better chance to dodge those fungals without canceling prismatic alignment, which this adds probably a lot more damage to the Void Ray army. But again, we keep buffing Skytoss units at the expense of Protoss ground, and that forces Protoss to get more into the late game in Skytoss, and that's just not good for the game of Starcraft. So it makes Protoss stronger, but it makes them less interesting. And here's another one, right? Tempests are a little bit smaller. That makes it a little bit harder to click on, probably. And now they zoom. Now they're more microable. Fine, sure, great, whatever. They're heavy siege units. You know, like that is their identity. We tried to make them fast harass units once. It didn't work. And now we're doing it again. And we're removing the identity in part of what a siege unit should be. We got rid of it with the lurkers. We said, hey, you don't get to move faster if you get your upgrades. And now this is just basic. Hey, you can accelerate at twice the speed. Okay. Another Skytoss buff. And again, Skytoss is not exciting. So, I don't know. They've overhauled the Mothership, which is interesting. So -400 memes are gone. Now they're -250, -250. But they've taken the Mothership from this ultimate late game unit, moved it into a mid game unit. And I'm gonna put the video up right now, probably up in that corner. But the movement of the Mothership now is nutty. With the speed increase, that's fine, but with this lateral acceleration increased by 3 orders of, like, by 30-fold effectively, it's nutty. It is so responsive. I'm gonna say the same thing I did. It doesn't have to be like that, but you know what, in general with this, I'm okay with this. What they've done is they've turned the Mothership into a late game unit that really is a meme into something that might actually be useful, and they're really encouraging players to play the version of Starcraft, or use Mothership for their recall, to reposition kind of like a big arbiter. And then just kind of this, oh, I'm gonna cloak my army, and it's gonna make it a little harder to engage, and we're gonna be less interactive, that we say in the late game. So it's smaller. Ghosts no longer hard counter it. It no longer has energy. It just has cooldowns. But the ability, like, with how much faster this is, and how much smaller it is, it means we're going to see, I think, more offensive recalls, and that's really exciting. I don't know if this is how this works. I haven't had a chance to test it yet, but I don't know whether the cooldown is shared across all Motherships. Like, if it dies and comes back and you build it again, the cooldowns will still be active, or whether they won't be, or they're kind of individual units. Because again, the Mothership is a hero unit, but I saw someone talking about, you know, recalling into the main base, letting it die, so you can chrono it out and rebuild it and have it done in 60 seconds, maybe with chrono. 79 is total. And then you save 11 seconds on recall. And then maybe you can recall back home. Or you recall back home to your Nexus, and you already have one chronoed out, so you can do it again faster. 250 is not that bad. I mean, it's on parity, I think, with most other Skytoss units. So they also kind of made Time Warp maybe a little bit more accessible, but on the flip side, not nearly as effective, which I'm totally fine with. Time Warp is one of those spells that makes things uninteractive, but I say this as saying that, you know, well, I guess fungal exists too, and this is just a great big Protoss fungal that doesn't do damage. But again, the whole host of changes here, I do like the cloak field, by the way, because again, it anti-incentivizes. I'm gonna have a Mothership, and that's just gonna sit on my army, and we're gonna be cloaked. It now has reasonable uses. Oh yeah, we're taking a fight, cloak the field. I recalled into my opponent's main, and now my opponent's trying to attack back into me. Cloak, make it harder on them. Those are good options. It's not permanent, because it is so much cheaper and you get it so much faster. It makes sense to nerf the cloak field. That makes a lot of sense. I also do like this, by the way. This just it makes it a little bit less punishing to preemptively pop a Guardian Shield and say, oh crap, I'm not fighting, which is really nice. And it means that it's a little bit easier, as the note says, to pop Guardian Shield before engaging into the armies, before the ghosts remove all the energy. So this does provide a little bit more utility from sentries into the late game. And on top of that, it further incentivizes Terran, especially with the EMP change, to go and be maybe a little bit more active with their ghosts. We see Clem and Spirit putting ghosts in their medevacs, boosting them forward to get EMPs on infestors and things like that. This maybe incentivizes that type of play. Just a small amount, but that's what it is. And who thought stasis traps needed this? Like, who? And if you're gonna do this, make burrowed unit, make Zerg burrowed units have more sight range. But stasis wards don't need to be observers. There is already a cloaked observing unit that a Protoss has. They don't need another. I mean, I guess they're different tech trees, but I don't think anyone's gonna say that Stargate openings are missing map vision. That's like that's the big thing it gives you. It gives you the ability to kind of be constantly in your opponent's face and see what they're doing. Revelations, Revelations and Phoenixes and all these things. I don't think that this is something that Protoss were missing, honestly. But this is a big buff, by the way, to the Immortals. That if you hit it with a big burst, so the big example that they give is with EMPs. So currently, as it says, if you hit an Immortal with an EMP, it'll take all the EMP damage against the shields and like zero the shields out. Now that EMP shot, there's no damage. It just triggers hardened shields, and then every damage after that hits against the shield. So it's gonna take 2 EMPs to do the same thing that one would otherwise have. It means that like a big Widowmine shot is another kind of example there, or a big tank shot or something. This is not going to impact. So against bursty units, this is a lot more in the direction of making Immortals truly immortal, which I think we're gonna see them more in. We already saw Hero do it last year in PvT. I think we might see them a little bit more in all matchups, which is big because again, the stalwart splash Protoss ground units have been nerfed a little bit with the Disruptors being up to supply. So I think I like this. It is a very different unit, right? It's not splash, it's not burst. It is just consistent high DPS and bulk that allows us into Protoss army. Is it enough to make Protoss ground viable into the late game? Even with the Raven nerf and the Ghost nerf and the Baneling nerf, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think this is enough. But I could be wrong. In fact, if I'm wrong and I missed something, let me know. But in general, these are my thoughts on the balance test changes. I think in general, I really agree with the Baneling and the Raven changes. I don't agree in general with the removing niches from the Cyclones and the Tempests and the Mothership. So I'm a little bit more okay with the Mothership and the Bird Lords and things like that, and just removing the the complexity of a Starcraft composition, because now things are starting to feel a little bit more samey. And I understand they're balancing for top level play, and they want the game to be balanced. But if everything does the same, why aren't we just playing Mass Marine versus Mass Marine? Like, the flavor of units is important. So that's my thought. But anyways, if you want to see more of this, you want to see more Stormgate news as it happens, you want a StarCraft cast, you should of course like this video. Let me know what you think about the balance changes, because this is a controversial one, and I think a little bit less wholesale excited about it than I was for other things. And I'm excited to talk to Zamagrub, Steadfast, and Cats. We'll probably have been talking for about an hour by the time this video goes live, so you should check her out. We'll be at twitch.tv/Zamagrub. If you want to see when I'm live, twitch.tv/JMWolf as often as I can. And again, let me know how you feel about this. Am I wrong? Am I right? Am I missing something? And of course, see you next time.